Hello, I'm Ashley Bennett, and I am a Sigma architect at Aimpoint Digital. Today, I'm going to walk you through the solution for week 48 of this year's Workout Wednesday for Sigma. This week, we'll be creating an announcements modal that tracks users' read and unread announcements. Let's get started.
First, we're going to create an empty input table. This is going to be used to track all of the incoming announcements. We'll just do that in the Sigma sample database, and we're going to call this announcements. And we want announcement as a text column, a date column for date to release. This will allow users to set upcoming announcements and not have to scramble to make one precisely at the right time. I'm also going to add another text column for made by and text. Let's do a single select text for expiration period. This wasn't in the challenge notes, but I'm going to go one step further and just create a expiration periods dem. Expiration okay, and we're just going to keep track of our expiration period. I am going to allow 4 different options. By putting this in an input table, I can use it as my value source for this single select column, as well as the control that we're going to create later. And if we decided to change it, we wouldn't have to update both places, which is great. And now that I have all those input columns, I'm ready to create some calculated columns. I'm going to create a calculation column. We're going to call this is not expired. And I am going to compare or look at the expiration period and then compare the date to release with the current timestamp and just see if they are within range. We don't have anything right now, so I'm going to add in a testing announcement. Let's add one for, let's going out today, made by me, and we'll set that expiration period at 3 days. We'll do another one. We will set that as first, sure, made by me, and we'll set that expiration at 1 week, and it is false. Awesome. Now, I'm also just going to delete the empty row. Now I want to add a calculated column to track if it is released. And this one is much more simple. We're just going to compare our date to release with now. And we want to be sure that date to release is less than or equal to now. And let's actually add one for a future test. Let's add one on Thanksgiving. And we'll set that expiration to 1 month. And there we go. Not expired, but it's also not released. And then finally, we want to add another calculation column. Finally, as far as our calculation columns, we'll add one last one that is called show announcement. And we just want to make sure that it is not expired and released. We're not going to filter at this time. I will go ahead and add in our row history columns and by, just to keep track of that. And now we want to add a table with our possible emails. If we were going to be adding this to an existing data app, I imagine that we would have a list of emails or users that, a list of emails or users that we could use. However, for our purposes today, we do not. So I'm just going to use an empty input table. We're going to call this emails. And we're just going to track some emails here. We want an email column and then a calculated column to track is current user. We're going to be using that down the line, and we just don't want to have to re-enter it multiple times. So current user email equals email. And now I just want to leave one blank row for now. I'll add in some data in a minute. Now let's join our two data sets. I'm going to create a child table of our announcements. I'm going to call this announcements by user. And let's add a join. I want to join to my emails element and like that. But notice we don't really have any columns that we could join to, but we do know we want every email to get every announcement. So I'm just going to add a formula here, and we're going to say true equals true. And that will put one row for each announcement and one with each email. That will fan your data, but that is the intended purpose here. Now, in order to track which announcements each user has read, let's make a linked input table from this announcements by user. And we want our unique row identifiers to be announcement and email. And then we also want some context columns. We're going to use our date to release, made by, and show announcement. And let's create this. We're going to call this announcements viewed. And then I want to filter this. Not there. Oh, shoot. Undo. Oh, I almost forgot. We do actually need that is current user, because now we're going to filter to true. Current user is not in there because I need to add my email. Okay, and let's just add in a awesome. Our input column, we only need one, but it's not a text column. We want to have a checkbox, and we're going to call this email has viewed, or seen, or email has viewed announcements. I try to keep them small, but we also want to understand what it means. And then I am going to add a summary column, and I want this to count the number of unread announcements, which you'll notice that as announcements come in, they're going to have a null value, so we do have to handle that. I'm going to coalesce email has viewed, and if it's null, we're going to replace it with false. And then basically we want to count the ones that are not true, or you could say count the ones that are false. There are multiple ways to do things, and I'm going to call this unviewed announcements. Awesome. Don't need that one. Oh wait, do need that one, sorry. Undo. We want to filter this to be true as well. And now we're only going to see our currently released announcements and whether or not they've been viewed. Now, with our data set up, we can create a button that will take us to our announcements. I'm just going to go to the bottom and add a button. Drag it in here. Make that a little smaller, and I will call this announcements. However, we also want to denote if the current user has unread announcements. So I am going to add some dynamic text in here by hitting equals. And then I'm going to insert this formula. And what that's doing is we're going to check that unviewed announcements summary value. And if it is greater than 0, we will show a little alarm clock emoji. Otherwise, we're not going to show anything at all. And in that, we will see the announcements with the emoji because I've currently viewed. But if I have checked that, then it goes away. Uncheck it for now. And then if we really wanted to get fancy, we could, instead of a button, we could use an image element with dynamic text that points to either a read or unread image URL. I recommend that these images be publicly hosted URLs so that there are no issues rendering due to expired authentication. If, for example, it were in your company's SharePoint, or if I've seen Mac users have issues accessing images from non-public URLs as well. With that all taken care of, we can now create our announcements modal. What I want to do is create a child of our announcements viewed, and I'm going to just create a table, and I want to hide columns. I need this announcement. I'm going to do by and move the date up, and we're going to change our column names. I'm just going to call date by an announcement and hide everything else. I'm going to use Shift H, keyboard shortcut to hide. And then I am going to move this table to a new modal. And I will move my dot so that I can rename this to announcements. And I'm going to call this announcements. But that's a little redundant here, so I'm going to go ahead and not show the title of my table. And I'm also going to rename it, even though it's not shown, just so it keeps a nice clean lineage and we know exactly what things mean. And on this table, I also want to show some conditional formatting. And I'm going to select all columns. And I do want a single color. And my formatting rule will be a custom formula. And I want that formula to be, oh, hold on. Here we go. I want that formula to look at email has viewed. If it's null, it will automatically be false. And if it's false, we're going to highlight it. And let's go ahead and highlight it like orange or something. And might as well also bold it. Make it very apparent that this is new. And now I want to do some formatting on my modal itself. We don't need both buttons, so I'm going to get rid of the secondary button, but I am going to call this make announcement. And then I am going to create another new modal. Let's go and add modal. And I'm going to add some controls. Let's add one for, I'm going to call this new announcement. It's always a good idea to prefix your control IDs because as your data app grows, it gets very confusing when all controls when controls and columns have similar names or the same name. So if we had just named this announcement, maybe there's another announcement text somewhere else or the column name itself. It gets very confusing in that formula dropdown. Now I also want to add another control for just a date, not a date range. I just want that date, and I'm going to call this when to release, but my control ID, I will do new date. And then finally, I want a list control, and I'm going to call this, or I'm just going to choose my expiration period, and that is fine there. Now I'm going to container all of these. I love to container my controls because that makes them very easy to clear later. I'm going to call this make announcement container. And then I want to name this modal, make a new announcement. And I also want my buttons. I want both buttons in this case. We're going to make announcement and clear form. And then, so rename this modal before I forget. Now we have all of our elements ready to go. We just need some actions so that it all works. So I am going to go back to my data page and I'm going to find my button. I'm going to add an action and all I want to do is open my modal. Open my announcements modal. It's very handy to rename your modals because then you know which one you're choosing. And now on my announcements modal, I want to update my actions. On close, I want to be sure that I update rows in my announcements. In my announcements viewed input table, and I want to update rows by formula. And all I want to do is by formula. All I want to do is add in show announcement. This is a Boolean field, so it will be either true or false. If it's true, I want to set it to true. Or sorry, if it's show announcement. Yeah, okay. I want to set email has viewed to true. And now also on our make announcement button, we need to open our modal. So let's go and open modal. We will open the make new. And in our make new modal, we're going to actions. Our primary is our make announcement, and I am going to insert a row into our announcements. And I want announcement, date, made by, we want to be current user full name, and expiration period, we want to be our expiration period. However, I need to adjust that first. We can't allow multiple selection. We also don't need to show the null or the histogram really. So then, yeah, that's fine. And back on our actions for here, let's set that expiration period. Great. And now our secondary, oh, sorry, nope, we still have more. Let's clear our controls because this makes for a good UI. We're going to clear our controls after we've inserted, and then finally we will close our modal. And then on our clear form, I am going to clear our container. And then on close, let's also clear that container. Excellent. Now let's arrange our workbook into a prettier app. We really only have a modal at this point, but that's fine. Let's move this to a new page. And I'm going to put it over here in the corner. I'm going to add a title. I like to use medium heading. We're just going to call this announcements test. You could put whatever else you want in your workbook. It doesn't really matter at this point, so I am just going to throw in an embed of my last challenge that I did. And just so there's something there. Again, it doesn't matter. You could make a workbook, have some sort of visuals showing. And then I also like to update my workbook theme. I love me a dark theme. And let's change our colors to match the other one there. And then I also like to set my table, presentation, medium looks good, and make sure all of my table things will wrap. And the last thing I want to be sure I do is set my input tables so that we can update them appropriately. Announcements, I want users with Explore access to be able to insert an announcement. And then announcements viewed, we want all users to be able to insert in the published versions. Our emails and dimension table, those can be left at draft. That is appropriate here. So now I'm going to publish, and let's test it out. I'm going to go to my published version. First of all, let's hide this. And now publish. Go to my published version. See, I have unread announcements. Here's an unread announcement. I want to make a new announcement. I'm going to say, Happy Thanksgiving. And I'm going to set this to release. I'm going to release it today because I want to be able to see it. And we'll set our expiration period.
Wasn't that easy? I'll see you next time for more Sigma challenges.